right, welcome back, and now our discussion and the big conversation begins right now. So tonight we want to answer at least 3 questions. First of all, why are young people, of course, struggle to get into leadership position despite the fact that they are the majority, 75% to be precise. So what is happening? That is one question. The other question is, how can we break the barrier? Well, just like I said, I may not have all the answers, but at least I have Nangami Masaha, public speaker and corporate trainer. He'll be here. She's already in the house. And of course, to help us navigate through this very familiar topic. Now, the inclusion and participation of young people, particularly women, in political process is a critical component of promoting equality and the voices of the young people in Kenya. This engagement ensures that all voices in the society, interest, and experience are reflected and captured in the decision-making process, as they form a huge segment of the society and yet form the paradox of the marginalized majority society. And now joining me in the discussion is Nangami Masaha, public speaker and of course corporate trainer. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this particular topic is not a new topic. We have been here before. Time and again, questions have been raised, sometimes answers that seem to be quote-unquote very promising, but the topics still keep on rising over and over again. Why is it so hard for young people to actually take their rightful position in Kenyan politics, given the fact that they are the largest in terms of percentage? That is according to, statistics by the, national population, 75% to be precise. Why is it so difficult for young people?
Of course, top of mind, the answer would be that leadership somehow has a connotation to it, that it's an old man or old people's game. So because most of the time we think that the youth do not have the wisdom that would guide them to take up leadership positions, that we assume that leadership is a function of experience, of which experience is a function of time, and most of the time the youth have not yet attained the level of experience and the time done and even the price paid for them to take up leadership positions. So most of the time young people do not take up positions, sometimes because of that fear that they are not up to the task. They don't have the capacity to lead. They don't have the scars of war. They have not yet done the time, and they have not yet paid the price that would then give them the capacity to lead. Because we know that anybody who has to lead, most of the time, they need to have the experience. They need to have done a bit of time for them then definitely to take up the leadership position. So I think most of the time it's because of fear that we don't measure up to take up those positions, which I think is a fallacy. It's a fallacious concept, especially in this time and age where we're in the 4th industrial revolution, and most of the time in this dispensation the youth have the capacity to lead because they understand whatever is happening in this particular generation, in this particular era. This is not to discard the wisdom of the ages, but just to say, if you can take up those positions based on where we are at, especially in corporate and even in politics, because if we had older people taking up these positions, they may not know how to lead a 75% mass, because we make up the big percentage of the electorate, big percentage of the workforce. So they find it difficult to lead this particular lot of people because they do not have the wisdom required for this particular generation. And I think at this time, it's the young people who are supposed to lead because they understand what is happening at this particular time.
Well, when you look at in this regard to young people, they have been tested and tried. We have some youthful members of parliament, leaders in these countries.
Right.
According to even Uzalendo, Trust, their records are pretty clear there to be seen. They are performing. So when it comes to track record, we can see statistics are there. It's already written on the wall with a big handwriting. Now, the question that many are asking, if you are 75% majority of the population, why is it so hard for young people to rally behind one of their own and actually now take the mantle and even shape the discussion? Why is it so difficult?
Okay, let's take it off corporate. Let's take it off the general assumption of what leadership is or what kind of leadership you're talking about. So I think the question you're referring to is in the political sense, in the political aspect. And we know that most of the time, the people who are mostly voted into, we consider old, have what we call, it's easy for them to entice the masses to rally behind them, because young people most of the time do not have the wherewithal financially to entice the masses to vote for them. We understand the kind of country that we live in, where sometimes we don't elect leaders based on merit. We elect leaders based on what can you do for me? What are you promising to give me? Now, young people might have all the right ideas. They might have all the right decisions that are required to lead, but because they do not have the financial muscle, the financial capacity to tweak and to test the ideas in the minds of the masses, most of the time we end up following whose pocket is fat. Most of the time that usually is, or who has the best, let me just leave it at that, financial muscle, not to ruin things, but the financial muscle. So most of the time, young people do not have that capacity to influence the masses. But just like you've mentioned, according to the research that was brought up, even previously, was it like a week ago, the top performing MPs are youthful. They are the young MPs who are performing well across the country. Most of them are young. I believe the top five of them are just youthful MPs. So that means that it's working. Young people can actually lead, and we can see the results. So the question which you've clearly brought out is, why aren't we taking these positions? Yes. And that is a question that I am here to help answer.
Okay. Well, you might as well as help us answer. Why are they not taking those, positions?
The reason why I believe youth are not taking these positions is because of the mindset, the mentality that we have with leadership. And we are fearful of taking up these positions because even positions of power in and of itself, a position of power is intimidating. And it needs someone of a particular caliber. Most of the time, for you to take a position of power, leadership position, you have to discard something we call likability. You really have to be the individual who wants to do whatever it takes to get things done. And for you to do whatever it takes to get things done, you're going to cause friction. You're not going to be liked. And we're living in a time where we want to be liked, we want to be loved, we want people to follow us, we want people to sing our praises. It takes a person of a particular stamina, a person of particular integrity, value systems, for them to stand at the test of time and say, I am here because I know that systems need to change, and therefore you have to put me in power. And that in itself can also cause frictions with the power that be and with the status quo. So it becomes very difficult because you're young, you're here, you want to get things done. But then again, we have things, in this country, usually say this is how things are done, and yet here you are young, you want to come and bring change. Pardon me, you want to bring change. It becomes very difficult then for you to hit, because it's like you're meeting an immovable object. It becomes very difficult for you to penetrate, and so most of the time people just fizzle into the background. They're like, it's not worth it, it's not worth the time, not worth the hassle.
Well, the perceived norms and even the beliefs from the society that certain group of people cannot do certain type of work is something that, to some, I think we might be past that. Well, even with the track record that we have seen, and of course, those who have been given the leadership position, they have performed according to, the mandate stipulated by them, and that is fine. We have seen that work. And now, this now brings the question of how to break the barrier, because it's something that we'll have this discussion today, tomorrow, and probably the day after tomorrow, and no change. So how can we break the barrier, the jinx that actually, keep on repeating itself, the circle? How can we break this?
I think a good place to start most of the time is with the mentorship, because I believe most of the time we have a problem when it comes to succession of leadership positions. The reason why we have this disconnect is because there's no succession, there's no mentorship. So it becomes very difficult for the old generation to pass on the baton to the next, to the incumbent, or not the incumbent, but to the incoming generation, and say, we did things in a certain way, and we know that these are our faults, these are the wrongs we made, these are the rights we made, and here we are, we want you to take this conversation forward. But because there's always that disconnect, it becomes very difficult then for us to influence any change. So the next generation that comes in will end up just repeating the same cycle because there's no mentorship. And so I believe that the first step would be to mentor as many young people to take up leadership positions as possible. It's not, it shouldn't be that the only time people want to get into leadership is when there's an open position for a leadership position. Everybody has to go through, and for me, that is why I have this project that I'm running, and the motto for it, let me just call it the motto, but the mission, the vision for it is making leadership accessible to everyone, leadership education accessible to anyone, such that when we are called to lead at any particular moment, if we were to wake up today in the middle of the night and say we want a particular caliber, or we want a caliber of young men and women to lead, we have a host of individuals who can rise to the occasion because they merit, because they've been mentored, and because they have it in them. It's almost innate. They can lead at any particular time. But for us to get to that particular point, it has to begin with mentorship. And in Kiswahili, we say samaki mkunja ngali mbichi. So we have to start with mentorship from as early as high school and college. By the time we get into these leadership positions, whether it's in corporate or even in politics, we have an entire group and crop of individuals who are ready to take up these positions, so that it doesn't become difficult then for us to pick among the people who have been fronted to us as leaders. It becomes very difficult to pick when you have a very small group of people and more than 75% of them are almost incompetent. Okay. So it's always about choosing who of the two is the worst, who's the best among the worst.
Okay. Now talking about option presented to you to choose from, and I want to read to you some of the research that was done by same Zalendo Trust about the involvement of the young people and women in politics. And one of the barriers, the study suggests that the young women still experience violence, and this cuts across violence, and that is physical, sexual, and verbal, that is used as a tool to intimidate the women, the young women, and of course even the young people that are taking up, or rather they're trying to marshal their way through this uncharted water of monkey politics, some might call it. So in our political, structures, even political parties, do they really walk the talk? Even when you look at their manifesto, based on the promise that they make to young people about creating the leadership position, even our constitution has a place for youth to actually have a voice and a representation in political and decision-making process as far as governance is concerned. So where are we actually sliding off the trail?
That's a brilliant question, because women in leadership, youth in leadership, I believe that the government has come up with youth empowerment, and there's a Ministry of Youth and Sports and all these things to try and bring the young people on board, but they continue to experience barriers and resistance and whatnot. That is why I told you that we need to have leadership education accessible to everyone, so that we can all understand what leadership is all about. The reason why women mostly are attacked is because perhaps as a society we have not yet come to an agreement that women equally qualify to lead. So therefore, if we have that sensitization and we all understand that women have a position when it comes to rallying for this, whether it's political, corporate positions, professional positions, business, they want to become business leaders, giving them equal opportunities. And once the masses have been sensitized to understand that even women can take up these positions, that youth, the young people, are equally capable, because of course of the research that was done recently, and we have seen that youth are performing quite well. Once as a society we can be sensitized to accept and to accommodate their leadership and not to discriminate them as in terms of their gender or in terms of their age, because of course then when it comes to youth and leadership, where we are discriminated is just about like ageism. You're not good enough, you're young, you're not old enough to lead. Once we can be sensitized as a society, then it becomes easy for us to be embraced. That's why leadership accessible.
Sorry to cut you short, but even you have mentioned a very important point, especially when it comes to, in this regard, the women, the young women, the perception that, first of all, we see you as a mother, a wife. Then the question is, how do you balance the power between being a mother, being a wife, and of course, the leadership role that you have been given? Because this is something that you have to fight it, even in the society, in the families. Now, there's the big question. Don't you think this could be the reason why some people in Africa set up believe that maybe women, their work is just meant to do this, maybe take care of the family, husband, something like that.
Yeah, you're right on the money. As a society, that is where we are. We don't believe that women can succeed effectively outside the home front. So once we see a woman who wants to take up a leadership position, we're almost wary of the fact that is she going to balance it well? And her first responsibilities to her home, her first responsibilities to her spouse or to her children. And therefore, we almost fault her. We're not so sure she's going to lead adequately in the leadership position. That is why, as a society, we need to change that mentality, because the men who are leading, their fathers, their husbands, and yet they are not discriminatory. It doesn't come up as much. So once we get to a point where we can equalize the playing ground, then become easy for everyone else then to take up these leadership positions.
All right, because we're running out of time, I'll give you 1 minute to actually, your closing remark.
Oh, all right. Leadership education accessible to everyone. That has always been my mantra, and I want everyone else to come and on board and take up these leadership positions. Parents, support your young children to get up into these positions. And with that, having said that, there's a program that I'm running. It's called the Young Student Leadership Summit, which brings on board students who are leaders. These are school captains, deputy captains, because we normally don't think of them as leaders in their own right. And once they can be mentored and get into these leadership positions, we're good to go.
Thank you. Well, that's all we had for you, actually. And Nangami Masaha, thank you so much for making time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Of course, up next,